Hello, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us on our Security Flash interview. My name is Ashish Gupta, and I'm Bugcrowd's CEO. Before I get started, if you have any questions for us, please submit those through the Q&A functionality, and we will get back to you. With me today is Adrian Ludwig, CISO at Atlassian. Hello, Adrian. Thank you for being here with us.
Hey, Sheesh, how's it going?
Going great, thanks. Adrian, I understand you started your career off as an ethical hacker at the NSA. Can you share what your journey has been like, and from that stage in your life to now being the CISO at Atlassian?
Sure, happy to talk a little bit about it. It's a little hard for people to probably think back, or at least for a lot of your viewers, to think back to the time when there wasn't really popular culture around hacking. Going into tech, and in particular into computers, was still pretty geeky. I ended up sort of stumbling into it a little bit because I had a guidance counselor in high school who said, hey, we know paying for college is going to be tough, and one of these government agencies, the National Security Agency, is willing to help out as long as you go into computers or math. I had always thought I would be in physics, but math didn't seem so far away, and computers was totally new for me. But I ended up starting off as a cryptographer for a little while, and then later realizing that that was too hard of math, too much statistics, ended up turning into what I guess now we would call a hacker. There were movies at the time like The Matrix and actually a movie called Sneakers, and it was sort of a fun idea of sort of learning how to break into computers. And actually back then it was, just to be blunt about it, pretty easy. Now you have to have a lot of skill, but back then somebody as new to it as me was able to be pretty successful. So it was a good time.
That's fantastic. Now, you are in a habit of going all the way, like directly to the NSA to be a hacker, CISO of Atlassian. I also know that you went all the way on a particular hike that was pretty interesting in Tahoe.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Ashish and I talked about this before. I'm introducing my boys. I have a fourth grader and a first grader to backpacking. So we thought June would be a good time to go out. Went for what was going to be a 3-day backpacking excursion. But on the first night out, we got caught in a thunderstorm up in the mountains. Turned into a rainstorm, then it turned into a hailstorm, then it turned into about 4 inches of snow. So we got stuck. It's my first experience with a little bit of frostbite. So that was pretty exciting. At this point, though, everybody's recovered. We've sort of forgotten about it. 6-year-olds, 2 months is a long time. And so they're excited to go out again. It seems like they're ready for that adventure.
That's fantastic. As a climber, I'm so glad that you're safe. So let's talk back to those days of being a hacker. We are getting a really good glimpse of what's in the mind of a hacker. This is a report that we've also put out at Bugcrowd, which gives great insights that you can get from our website today. So coming back to you, so how do you think, and how has your perspective changed on the attack surface when you cross the line from finding vulnerabilities to now protect those assets from the inside?
Yeah, so I switched sides, if you will, after about 7 or 8 years. Early on, it was really exciting to find bugs. It was really exciting to report those bugs or write tools to exploit them, as the case might be. But eventually, it got to be a little bit frustrating for me. It seemed like I was doing the same thing over and over again. And it wasn't hard. I think that's changed quite a bit. Now it's a lot more difficult to find security issues. People are a lot more invested in protecting them. But for me, looking for hard problems and trying to figure out how to work on the hardest thing has always been what I've been excited by. And so initially it was like, okay, well, what about building defensive things? And so I moved over to the defensive side, did some consulting work, helped build tools to protect web apps and platforms and lots of different things. And then eventually I realized that even that is not the hardest problem, at least for me. It didn't seem like it was the hardest problem. The hardest problem was the people, right? Like everybody knows that you should patch. Everybody knows that you should do the scans. Everybody knows that before you ship a feature, you should have a security review. And yet, for some reason, we just don't do those things. And my experience as a consultant and as a hacker had been people knew that they should do those things. They just didn't. And so I've actually spent the last, I don't know, 10 years or so trying to figure out how to help organizations, whether it be Google or whether it be Android or now at Atlassian, how do we solve some of the sort of persistent non-technical problems? And really, how do we build out organizations to be more successful at defending themselves against security? I think we've made a lot of progress, but there's still a lot more to be done. And it's going to be a combination of people and technology that'll help get us to a point where there's a lot more security inside of the tools that we're building, the apps that we're deploying.
So Adrian, from knowing the team you have built and your approach, you've done a phenomenal job of creating diversity of people, diversity of experiences, diversity of even your security posture. What are some things you think about as top concerns when you think about your current security posture and the current environment we're living in?
Yeah, it's complicated, that's for sure. I think if you look back sort of the early days of security, a lot of those folks were misfits, right? They were interested in understanding how things worked, especially in understanding how things worked that the people who built them didn't understand how they worked, right? And that's where their sort of hacker ethos came from. At this point, so many of those technologies are so deeply woven into the way the world works that the misfits are the people that are not sort of at the core of how we're building those technologies. I really ran into this a lot when I was working on Android, and we had groups of people that were using Android that really did not line up with the set of folks that were building it. Right? They were really, really impoverished. And so having a good data connection wasn't something that was possible. In some instances, they were working in an environment where they were being repressed by their local government. That was not something that we were experiencing at the time in Silicon Valley. They were, in some instances, in domestic environments that were harboring abuse of lots of different kinds. It could be at children, it could be at spouses. So there are all of these sort of situations that were ones that were outside of what I or many members of the team were able to appreciate. And so as we started thinking more and more about what those situations could lead to, we had to think about how to build a model to help protect against it. And we really had to understand it. And so for me, that was the beginning of the realization that so much of the security community has become sort of ossified around the original hacker mentality, right? The original set of people who were hackers. But so many of the threats that are out there in the world that we need to be thinking about how to protect against are ones that didn't affect those people, right? White men do not have to, in Silicon Valley, or in my case, in Massachusetts back in the day, aren't facing those kinds of threats. And so if we're going to begin building systems that are resistant to those kinds of threats, we need to start figuring out how to bring in those perspectives. Some of it can be done with product management, bringing in different customers and interviewing them, but some of it's got to really be baked into the core of how these organizations work. We've tried to do that. We tried to do it at Android, bringing in lots of perspectives, having a lot of bottoms-up discussion of what the threat models might look like. We've tried to do a similar thing at Atlassian, trying to make sure that we're incorporating as diverse a group of people, but then also constructing an environment where it's possible to hear the voices of the people that you've sort of brought in, right? It's more than just about hiring. It's also about creating an environment where people feel included, and their perspective is one that's important. So I think the security industry in particular is facing that in a way that's probably more important to their mission than is even the case for the general software industry, which has struggled to incorporate lots of different voices as well.
You're absolutely right, Adrian. And being in crowdsourced security, that diversity is on thought, diversity of technique, and even diversity of experiences that bring together a really solid solution. Security is an infinite game where the rules are constantly changing, the players are constantly changing, and there are a lot of unknowns. For you, how are you using crowdsourced security, especially as you have leveraged the key of the Bug Crowd platform and the crowd to innovatively address two different use cases? I believe internal infrastructure and then also with your partners to make them more safer in the Atlassian marketplace?
Yeah, there's a lot of advantages to something like bug crowd and incorporating crowdsourced security bug bounty programs. I think some of them are almost so obvious that people overlook them. Even on a team the size of Atlassian's, where we've got over 100 security engineers are working on it, having more perspectives is hugely valuable. We'll have an engineer who's decided they're going to build something using a new technology. We don't want to hire an expert in that technology to work on our product. But there's a pretty good chance that in the thousands of people who report into bug crowd, there'll be somebody who will look at it and be like, awesome, this thing that I've been meaning to do some research on, suddenly somebody's built something with it and I can actually do some research on it and get paid for it. So that ability to turn on a dime, the ability to explore the nooks and crannies that we otherwise wouldn't, hugely valuable. There's another element that we think a lot about, which is how do you sort of see the unknowns, right? Back in my day, there was a guy named Donald Rumsfeld who was fairly important, but he had a quote about the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. And the thing that he was most worried about was the unknown unknowns, right? The things that in the security business, we've always got a list of things that we haven't done yet. We're going to get to them eventually. They're problems. But then there's the things that you haven't even conceived of. And those are the types of things that bug crowd or crowdsourced security in general is able to help you find, right? And not only are they able to help you find it, but they're also able to help you sort of put a dollar amount on it. One of the things that we've been pretty aggressive about at Atlassian and other places that I've been in the past is continuously increasing the amount that we're paying for issues. Because for us, that's a sort of a barometer, right? A measure for how effective our security program is, how effective the community is at finding those issues, and overall, whether our level of investment is appropriate. That's one of the biggest challenges, right? Is to understand, are we doing enough? And so not only do we rely on crowdsourced security to help improve what we're doing, but we also use it as a way to measure whether we're doing enough. And the answer is always no. There's more to be done, but at least we have a sense for it.
That's so much the case. And, when you're in an infinite game, you have to play by the infinite game's rules, right? Which is trying different things, learning from those different things, and ensuring that diversity of thought enables you to make a much stronger play in that infinite game. Adrian, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you all, everyone that joined. I also would love to say thank you to our emergency workers and our firefighters as we go through some pretty difficult times right now. Adrian and I are both outdoorsmen, and so seeing some of these fires does hurt us, and it's really important to recognize all the people that keep us safe. We will be sharing some information with you regarding our next Security Flash interview, and have a great day. Thanks again, Adrian.
Thanks, Ashish. Good to see you.